online on a Sunday morning with people from mixed states, all this would have been, if not inconceivable, it would have just been so and would have felt so unlikely. Why would we want to meet like this? What sort of situation would give rise to the necessity to meet like this? We've all been living through a time of incredible flux. A kind of flux that has been a major upheaval for some, with job losses and school closures and a whole reorganizing of hospitals and systems and institutions. And we've all had to meet this somehow in varying degrees. Some of us have had to meet it in very subtle ways. Perhaps just the way we greet and spend time with our neighbours. Perhaps even just the strange new dance that takes place when we go shopping, where we, in order to look after one another, step away from each other, twirling around each other in the aisles of the supermarket because of our care for one another. There have been all kinds of new and unexpected and unfamiliar demands placed just on being in the world right now. We're not quite able to live as we thought we would be living. And I want to look into this question of how can we fully and completely throw ourselves into the mix of actually what is happening? How can we meet the world that is unfolding right before our eyes? An unfolding world that does not look like the world we expected. And to do that, I'd like to pick up on a lovely story from the Lotus Sutra, one of the great central sutras to our Mahayana tradition. And there's a beautiful story in there about the Dragon King's daughter, an 8-year-old girl who, of course, is the daughter of the Dragon King. We don't need to dwell on the details of the Dragon King, but you can imagine a very impressive fellow with, as it turns out, a very impressive daughter. And the story in the Lotus Sutra tells us that this young 8-year-old girl decided that she would offer a jewel to the Buddha, a jewel worth 3,000 worlds. I love this currency. We don't seem to value things in worlds so much anymore. In fact, I sometimes wonder whether we even value the one world that we clearly have. But this young girl, she offered this jewel worth 3,000 worlds to the Buddha in homage, we're told, in homage. And in that very act, immediately, she too became a Buddha. This is a very interesting story, and one that's so interesting that, to my mind, one of the greatest teachers of the of the 8th to 9th century, Zhao Zhou, old Zhao Zhou, who lived, well, somewhere between the ages of 80 to 120 years, perhaps died when he was 120 years old. Zhao Zhou, the old great teacher, he takes up this story from the Lotus Sutra of the Dragon King's daughter. And he addressed his assembly of that time, which was never a large assembly. It never attracted more than perhaps 30 or 40 people, and yet Zhao Zhou has single-handedly nearly influenced and informed and profoundly enriched our tradition in so many ways. And this case indeed is one of those ways. The master stood before this assembly and said, "The Dragon King's daughter paid her personal homage to the Buddha from her heart. It was a completely natural act." And then a monk stepped forward and said, "If it was natural, why was there any paying homage?" And the master said, "If there was no paying homage, how could it be natural?" I actually find this a very moving case and a very interesting case to take up right now, where we can explore what it means to give something away and how natural that is, and how natural the care and respect and gratitude for just what is happening is, and how that translates into fully meeting and becoming what we naturally are. As I said, this is not an easy time to meet. But I like that the Dragon King's daughter here offers perhaps the most priceless thing she has, this jewel. And I'd like to encourage you all to see this as her giving all that she has away, all of her possessions away. She's relinquishing the 3,000 old worlds, the worlds that no longer quite meet the one world that she is in. She's able to give them away in homage. This giving away is an act of deep and profound respect and love for this world as it unfolds. Not a static world, but a world that is forever unfurling, unfurling, flowing, flowing. She throws herself entirely into the moment that she has, and this is what the Buddha receives. So there's that to explore, but there's also this wonderful insight of Zhao Zhou's where he says that this Dragon King's daughter made this offering and homage personally, from the heart. The practice of throwing everything away to rejoin the moment that we're actually in is not an intellectual pursuit. It's not something we figure out. It's not something that we deduce through analysis or a kind of pedantic sort of study. It's inspired from the heart. And it is done personally. Nobody can wake up for you. Nobody can solve the sense of separation from what is going on around you for you. It must be done personally. This moment can only be met personally. The sunlight through this window falling on the floor in front of me. I must meet that. And to meet it, I must give away everything I thought about sunlight, everything I thought about what this day might be, what this world might be. To meet it, I have to become complete sunlight falling on the floor. Nothing more, nothing less. And I like that Zhao says this meeting between the Dragon King's daughter and the Buddha, and the two of them falling into Buddhahood together. He says it is an entirely natural act. It was, he says, an entirely natural act. As natural as a flower opening. As natural as clouds dissolving in the sky or appearing in the sky. As natural as words somehow falling from my mouth, arriving in your ears. What could be more or less natural than that? It is just the way things are. Nothing forced, nothing withheld. And Zhao is drawing our attention to the fact that this is the way the world moves. This is the way the world presents itself, moment to moment, moment flowing into moment, unceasingly. And that you are naturally and entirely part of that mix. But I love that there's a monk in this assembly who steps up and he has a question about all of this. Remember, he asks, if it was natural, why was there any paying homage? I wonder if you can feel your way into the question of this monk. If it was natural, why was there any paying homage? That's a question of if all of this world just keeps flowing natural, if things are just as they are, what's this note of gratitude that you're talking about here with the Dragon King's daughter? Why this sense of, why this note of love? What's that got to do with the so-called natural world? Isn't the world just fierce and cruel and mean and flowing in a kind of impersonal way? But Zhao he will not entertain that. He will not acknowledge that rather stark and removed observation of the monk, or question of the monk. A piercing question, I think, of this monk's. Because remember, Zhao responds to that question by saying, if there was no paying homage, how could it be natural? Can you see how this paying homage to what is actually the quality of naturalness, that gratitude, love, seamless connection, being moved by the world. This is what is most natural. This is what opens us up and moves us seamlessly into connected life, a kind of connection that is beyond one thing locking into another. It is no other, pure connection, seamless relationship. And it's funny how even the simplest things can draw our attention to that. I mentioned the sunlight falling on the floor before, but anything that we really give ourselves over to can provide exactly that kind of insight and can move us into genuine connection with what is, into this flowing state of naturalness. I remember this happening for me once when my, well then 5-year-old son, a little bit younger than the Dragon King's daughter, gave me a present for my birthday. I had no idea what it was, but it was a very colourful parcel, possibly hand-painted, wrapped with a very large amount of sellotape, sort of spiraled around this parcel. So it took me, quite a long time to open this little present. But finally, when I did open it, I revealed a stick. And it was just a stick that he'd found in the back garden. And I turned to him and I said, "Is this for me?" And he looked at me very solemnly and said, "It's a stick." And I just immediately fell in love with this stick and with my son and with the whole joyous sense of everybody standing around the kitchen, smiling, laughing, but not at the stick and not at my son and not at me enjoying it so much, laughing and relishing the miracle of just what is. What a gift. This stick was, well, it was certainly worth 3,000 worlds, perhaps maybe even 4,000 worlds. It was worth life itself. Just one stick. And look at the plethora of things that are always revealing themselves all around us all the time. Are not each one of these moments, each one of these things priceless? And is not meeting them entirely also giving them back entirely, giving them back, offering them back into the flow? This is a kind of rolling with life, rolling with love. And I love that this is not a heartless business. This is not detached in any way. It is profoundly involved. So it's interesting to reflect on how can we meet this moment that we're in, this moment that I want to call a sort of, we're in this moment of pandemic, yes, but it seems to be also part of this ongoing moment of, well, revelation. We've had the fires through summer. We're all so aware of the existential crisis of climate change. We know these things are so real that they are manifesting themselves in incredibly real ways, even for us, or those of us who are relatively cushioned by stable institutions and wealthy economies and all sorts of things like that. And even then, we are being shown that business as usual no longer works. It's no longer sustainable. So the question is, how do we come to see the gift of this? How do we come to see the value of what is very difficult, very strange, certainly unfamiliar? It's as if this time has thrown a great mist around everything. I think the landscape of our lives has become less knowable. I think of this mist as making everything look strange again. It makes the landscape become, even a familiar landscape becomes unfamiliar when this sort of mist of uncertainty swirls around it and obscures things. But in that obscuring, it also reveals them, reveals new shapes that perhaps we hadn't picked up on before. And I think that's what's happening for many people in terms of what their relationship to work might be, what their relationship to friends might be, what their relationship to strangers might be. How do we offer our entire lives to these new situations, to these new people? How can we see the face of the Buddha in every stranger we meet and offer them our entire lives, throw our entire lives away in order to join the life that is actually happening? This is tricky. This is a big ask, but this is the ask of the Bodhisattva. This is the task of the Bodhisattva. And I can't help but draw in a poem that was on one of Ron's YouTube videos that he recently sent around. The poem picks up on this sense of mist, and I think actually picks up on this time that we're in right now, revealing an interesting way to proceed. The poem just goes, "Valley mist, running my finger over the curve of a twig. Valley mist, running my finger over the curve of a twig." Can you see how twigness itself is no longer an idea here? In the midst of this uncertain time, we're having to touch things afresh, discover them afresh, and not rush to name them in any particular way, but to run our finger over the curve of things, to discover the new contours of a life that is new, a life that is to be discovered personally and to be shared personally in every single situation. Just like the stick that I was given by my son became completely unfamiliar in the way it was offered from the heart with complete sincerity. We can offer ourselves from the heart with complete sincerity. And in that act become wonderfully mysterious to the people, not in a sort of alien way, but in a fresh way. Reveal our true vitality, and then enjoy the vitality of what we meet in return. We're told that the Dragon King became a Buddha. This is the dynamic of Buddhahood. This dynamic of the dance, singing and dancing of the voice of the law, remember from Hakuin. This practice is a dance. And I hope you can hear too in Ron's poem that this mist really emphasizes the sense of not trying to know anymore. The misty nature of this moment is a moment of great not knowing. Collectively, we're all participants in this great creative experiment, societal experiment of not knowing. When things grow misty, we can discover a new kind of connection. And I'm not trying to gloss over how difficult this actually is, because part of the mistiness is a great grief for what we know is no longer going to be our lives. We know that things won't actually be returning to a kind of business as usual, and nor do we really want them to, or I certainly don't want them to return to a business as usual. I'd love the schools to open again for my children. I'd love all sorts of institutions to regain their traction and be able to service people well and thoroughly again. But I do not want to be involved in a world that continues to live by damage, that continues to engage not from the heart, not in the entirely natural way I've been speaking about, but in an extractive way, a way that steals from one another, steals from the earth, steals from the moment. This is not the kind of world I want to return to. And I think part of our Bodhisattva work is to really ensure that we insist on responding and engaging naturally from the heart in an attitude and in the grounded wisdom of homage. And I want to draw this talk towards a close by just bringing up one last encounter with Jiao Zhou that actually again touches on this episode with the Dragon King's daughter. Another monk actually stepped up to Jiao Zhou and said, "The Dragon King's daughter paid her personal homage to the Buddha. It's not clear to me. How did she pay homage?" And Jiao Zhou simply pressed his hands together in Gasho. There is nothing left out of this Gasho. In fact, in this act, the entire world Gashos. And the monk, Jiao Zhou, me, you, we are all pressed together in this act of homage. I've actually noticed that with social distancing, the Gasho has, even beyond the sort of spheres of spiritual practice or religious practice, it has entered our world. People are gashoing to one another as a way of showing their love and respect. It's actually a beautiful thing to see, quite unexpected actually, but totally appropriate, totally in keeping with the moment that we're in. And I love that just this simple act of respect, of courtesy, of care, this is the inspiration for all wise and meaningful action in this world. Just this sense of, I offer my life for you. I give my life for this moment. I surrender my expectations in order to completely meet just what is happening as it is happening. Not easy work, and yet entirely natural work. And perhaps we can pick up some of the implications of this when we have a discussion period a bit later. But in the spirit of Jiao Zhou, I'll close this talk now, and perhaps there's no better way to close it than to simply press my hands together in Gasho.